When the holidays start to feel a bit repetitive, reach for a Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry and put your twist on tradition. A bold cranberry and winter spice flavor fusion, Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry is a refreshing way to shake things up this sipping season. And only for a limited time. Sprite. Obey your thirst.
The Disney Plus Hulu HBO Max bundle. The ultimate bundle at an unbelievable price. Starting at $19.99 a month. On Disney Plus, go behind the scenes with Taylor Swift in The End of an Era.
Every single one of us all clicked together.
Battle it out with The Roses on Hulu.
Things are getting a little out of hand.
Well, you think?
And don't miss The Conjuring, Last Rites on HBO Max.
I don't know how to protect you this time.
All these and more streaming this month. Plans starting at $19.99 a month. Terms apply. Visit Disney Plus Hulu HBO Max Bundle.com for details.
Hey, where you been? Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, come on in.
Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I'm Stephen Means, and that's Andrew Gillis. And it's time to talk about Ohio State's 2026 recruiting class. As promised, last week there was so much going on that it was kind of difficult to fit that in to last week, which is why if it were up to me, signing day would be this week anyway. No one's worried about conference championship games. If you're playing in a college football playoff game, even if you're playing in the first round, you got 2 weeks to game plan for that stuff. If you're dealing with coaches who are leaving for other jobs, it gives them some time they can do both of those things at the same time. It's just a lot less on people's plate if you moved it to this week, which is exactly why it's last week, because this sport just continues to make no sense when it doesn't have to not make any sense. Ohio State finishes with the number 6 recruiting class in the country with 27 commitments. We talked about a lot of these guys last week, but we will continue to talk about them this week. But the biggest news, Andrew, is a week ago, we did a pod that we posted on Tuesday where we were both under the assumption of there's not going to be any drama. It's just going to be what it is. They got 28 guys. They're going to sign their 28 guys. Maybe they lose one to USC, right, which we'll talk about later. But, it kind of is what it is. And then Brian Hartline gets offered and accepts the job at South Florida. And then for the next 72 hours of everybody's lives, we go from Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith injury watch to Chris Henry Jr. flip watch. And Ohio State was able to fend off Oregon, fend off LSU, and fend off Texas to hold on to the number 10 player and the number 1 wide receiver in the country, who is also the longest tenured member of this 2026 recruiting class in Chris Henry Jr. How big of a deal is it that Ryan Day was able to salvage this given the circumstances?
Yeah, it was huge. It was one of those things that I think definitely kind of gave you some lessons of maybe let's just wait for the finish line to kind of judge where we're at, not just for the entirety of the class, which we can kind of get to here in a minute. But I mean, think about every the timeline of just up and down. And you ever seen that chart? It's like a meme. It's like, we're so back, it's so over. We're so back, it's so it was kind of just that of, wait a minute, Oregon's going to get him. Oh, wait, no, Ohio State's got the lead. Oh, wait, no, Texas is now in the mix. Oh, wait, no, LSU threw a big offer at him. West Virginia, where do they come from? It was just all of this mess going on. And it was a really, really big ad because, one, on the field, you kind of look at where Ohio State's receiver room is right now. I mean, how much we talked about the Big Ten championship game, and the last couple of games, they're pretty much unwilling to play depth of receivers there. And there's multiple issues, as I talked about too. It's not just one thing or the other, but they might need another guy. They might need some help here. And at bare minimum, we're talking about this team and red zone issues. This can be a red zone fix, even if he's not a full-time player. Even if Chris Henry Jr. is going to get, 5 to 10 snaps a game next year because he's a freshman and he's not ready. And all right, put him in the red zone. He's 6'6". He can go up and you can have that threat of, he can go win a jump ball. You have that threat of, he can go high point something and make a really, really nice catch. Yeah, I think that this was a big ad on the field. I think off the field, when you compare it to kind of what was going on with Ohio State, where, look, Chris Henry objectively did the right thing by taking a step back and not signing on Wednesday. He had been committed since July of 2023. And then, I don't know, was it 9 in the morning on National Signing Day? His coach leaves, or his position coach leaves, and the guy who's, kind of one of the big reasons, if not the reason why he's going to Ohio State leaves. Yeah, totally fine. Take your time. But the fact that Ryan Day and Mark Pantoni and kind of the rest of that recruiting staff really just kind of said, screw everything else, and they threw whatever they had at landing Chris Henry Jr., I think was really, really impressive. So big deal off the field to get, a recruitment like that to go your way, despite a very reasonable kind of delay, a very reasonable kind of situation, even if it did drag on and was probably annoying for a lot of fans and for people in every program that was trying to recruit him. And it's a big deal on the field because you look at the receiver room, Carnell Tate's going to go, but you got JJ, you got Brandon Ennis, and then what? Quincy Porter's been hurt all year. Like, he's been on and off the injury report, and he's been on it more than he's not. Mylan Graham, I don't know. He played like one time, and Ryan Day was like, we need to see more consistency from him. So on the field, off the field, whatever you want to say, big deal to get Chris Henry Jr. in the class.
So I get it. Brian Hartline, the start of his coaching career has been pretty impressive, right? And some of the recruits he's landed, the players he's developed, some of the guys he's gotten drafted and whatnot. And he is a big deal. He is going to be very much missed in Ohio State when he is officially off to Tampa to coach the South Florida Bulls. I get that. I'm not going to devalue that. But this is not his program. This is Ryan Day's program. And I don't care how many things we change in college football. The three most important people in a college football program are the head coach, the strength and conditioning coach, and whoever is the GM, which is obviously that role has shifted over time. You've had like the recruiting director. Now it's essentially everybody's got a GM. I think those three people are the cornerstones of a program, and everybody else is, pieces that can interchange all the time. Assistant coaches are middle managers. So but also we're living in a world where sometimes a middle manager can be, more important than other middle managers. I understand that, but should an assistant coach matter this much in a world? So. Go ahead.
Well, I think so. I think so with Brian Hartline. Like, I think in a general whatever sense, you probably shouldn't have a middle manager, quote unquote, a position coach or a coordinator matter that much, right? Like, I don't know if you are the whatever general coach at North Texas, right? Like, if you're an offensive line coach at North Texas, like, I'm not saying, like, kids commit because of coaches like that, but you also need to commit for other factors as well. But like, Bill Bedenbaugh was the offensive line coach. I don't know if he's still there. He was at Oklahoma, and he was kind of regarded as the best offensive line coach in the sport. It was either him or like Harry Heastand at Notre Dame. I don't know. If you're committed to one of those programs and Bedenbaugh or Heastand leaves, it's totally reasonable, in my opinion, to take that step back and go, I was about to be coached by the GOAT at this position, the best in the sport at this position, and now he's gone, right? Like, if James Laurinaitis becomes the greatest linebackers coach in college football, okay, I think it's totally reasonable for a linebacker to say, I'm coming to Ohio State because of James Laurinaitis. And then if James Laurinaitis takes a defensive coordinator job at Syracuse, okay, it would be very understanding if like a kid like Braxton Rembert goes, whoa, let me hang on a minute. Let me make sure I'm good. So I think it only matters because of, it's kind of like a backwards way of thinking maybe, but it only matters because of how good he is, right? Like if Brian Hartline was Joe Schmo and Ohio State was just kind of just doing this every year where, like Ohio State's always had good receivers, but we can all agree that Brian Hartline was probably the best at what he did. So that's why it matters, and that's why it's different for Ohio State.
And there's not a lot of times where that's the case, right? Like Chase Young, why did he come to Ohio State? Because Larry Johnson was here, right? Nick Bosa, because Larry Johnson was here, but also because his brother had already been here. Quarterback's a little bit different because Ryan Day's also the head coach. So like that's a whole different category in that situation. I think we can say that Peyton Pierce is in Columbus because James Laurinaitis is in Columbus, right? Because his recruitment, he was headed to Notre Dame, and then James Laurinaitis left and became a GA here. And now all of a sudden he's at Ohio State, right? But that list is short of the amount of times where it feels like a recruitment simply came down to you have this guy in the building and somebody else doesn't. And it's not always going to be the case here. But I do wonder, Brian Hartline has only ever coached at Ohio State. And I was thinking about this as I was listening to his introductory press conference, and he was meeting with the media for the first time, and they were asking him questions about the value of recruiting South Florida and keeping these kids home, and him talking about how important it was for him to build his base there, and all the things that, coaches say during introductory press conferences. So that are valid points. It's the things he's going to do, but it's also the things you said at introductory press conference. And it was the first time it dawned on me, this is the first time in Brian Hartline's career he's not going to have the first pick. It's the first time in his career where it's called the Brian Hartline discount, right? Did Kiss Henry Jr. commit in 2 years before he had to because Brian Hartline was here? Marvin Harrison Jr. commit in a year before he had to because Brian Hartline was here. Jameer Brown has been committed for the life of me. I can't even over a year as a 2027 recruit because Brian Hartline was here. And I'm not... I don't think the discount was financial. It was how early these kids were locking in, because that's not the first time it's happened. If you go back and look at most of Brian Hartline's cycles, by mid-July, his classes are done and he's moved on to the next. But that's also in a world where he had the first pick. He doesn't have to worry about, I done found Jackson Smith-Njigba as like a 3-star recruit down there in Texas. He's pretty good. I'm wondering why nobody else is recruiting him. I want that guy. I'm going to offer that guy. That guy commits to me early. And then by the end of his high school career, he's a 5-star recruit. Brian saw that early. But when you have the first pick and you see it early and it hits, you don't have to worry about the big dogs coming in and stealing them from you. Yeah. Because you are the big dog. He's not the big dog anymore. And so I do wonder, he's not going to get the number 1 receiver in the country to go to South Florida. At least I don't think he is. I don't think he is, but I guess we'll find out. But Ohio State's offense is still going to be Ohio State's offense without Brian Hartline. And I think Chris Henry Jr. was a small sample size of, as long as Ryan Day doesn't just whiff on the hire, I think Chris Henry Jr.'s are still going to come to Ohio State. Because they're still going to have Julian Sands. They're still going to have Justin Fields. They're still going to have CJ Strouds. Tavian St. Clair's up next, right? That's at least the expectation. He's going to be the next starting quarterback after Julian Sands leaves. So if the offense is still going to be the offense, and the quarterback play is still going to be the quarterback play, where the floor is our quarterback got drafted. I don't know if we see a world where they're pulling in 4 5-stars, or they're doing what they did in 2020, where they had 2 5-stars in Jackson and Julian, and then 2 other top 90 recruits in Mookie Cooper and G. Scott, and then they followed up a year later with Emeka Ibuka, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Jaden Ballard. I don't know if that happens. I don't know if you get the 2024 class where JJ is the best player in the country and Mylan Graham's a 5-star. But I think what Ohio State's wide receiver class is in 2026, Chris Henry Jr. is the number 10 player and the number 1 wide receiver in the country. Jacraden Guilford is the number 137 player and the number 22 wide receiver in the country. Aiden Ricketts is the number 424 player, number 62 wide receiver in the country. And Block Boyd is the number 602 player, number 84 wide receiver in the country. I think that's a pretty decent class. You got a dude who you think might start right away for you. You got a dude in Jacraden Guilford who could have easily flipped to Lane Kiffin at LSU and didn't do so. You held on to all 4. You held on to 4 of your 5 receiver commitments, and the one you lost, you were going to lose regardless if Brian Hartline was here or not. So you got a guy who could be an immediate impact player, a guy in Jacraden Guilford where I don't think either of us will be shocked if he's pushing for playing time in the starting role in 2027. You got a potential diamond in the rough in Brock Boyd, and you got a guy who's maybe a bit more of a developmental guy in Jaden Ricketts. I think Ohio State can still put that class together even if Brian Hartline's not here.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it was the perfect marriage to where you are not asking for the Brian Hartline discount at Illinois, right? You're not asking for the Brian Hartline discount at Virginia. And you're Ohio State, you've got the history, you've got the program, you've got the block, you've got the whole song and dance that comes with being a blue blood in college football, right? You've got it. Then you pair that with the fact of, hey, we've got the best receiver talent evaluators and or developer, and we're sending dudes to the first round every year like nobody else. And it's there's literally one other school in college football who is even within spitting distance of what they're doing at receiver, and it's LSU. And that's kind of it. Nobody else is really even close. And I think LSU is LSU has had some benefits there too of hey, it's LSU. You're not asking kids to go to Louisiana Monroe, because that's where that dude is.
You're asking kids from Louisiana to just stay home.
Yeah, you're asking kids from Louisiana or Texas, hey man, get on an hour flight and then come play for us, or drive 3.5 hours and come play for us. It's very simple. But yeah, I am curious. I'll be keeping an eye on how he does at South Florida, because I would love for this scenario to happen where he lands a 4-star receiver that's number 280 in the class. And let's say this kid goes from St. Thomas Aquinas, or goes to St. Thomas Aquinas, which is a really, really good football program down in Fort Lauderdale. And all of a sudden there's this kid, he's like 275. He's a top 300 prospect. He's number 1 or number 2 player in South Florida's class, and everything's great. And then you get to the fall and this kid takes some steps forward.
Ohio State.
And I was going to say, I was going to use Ohio State, but forget Ohio State just because we're an Ohio State podcast. Like, Miami makes a phone call and Miami offers him on September 10th. What happens? I don't know. That to me is going to be very interesting, to where how does he kind of fend off the big dogs? And I still think Ohio State has that element of, hey, we are still the big dogs. And, would it stun me if South Florida has a kid that's number 280 and Ohio State says, actually, we really like this guy, and whoever the new kind of receivers coach is, and whoever takes that step goes, hey, we want to offer this kid. And they do what they did this cycle, which again, we'll talk about. And they do what they did this cycle, and they go get a kid, on October 10th, if they make an offer and they say, we'd love for you to come for a game day visit. We play Oregon this week. Come up. And I don't know what would happen there. I think a couple things are true here. I think it's reasonable to expect Brian Hartline to still have quality wide receivers. Like, he's going to carry his name value and his name brand down to South Florida, and a lot of good receivers in Florida, and like a lot of talent in Florida. He can probably keep a handful of those kids home, and a handful of those kids that, maybe it's not even Ohio State, maybe it's Florida State. And all of a sudden now they're going to South Florida, not Florida State. Or maybe they're going to South Florida instead of Georgia Tech, right? Like, some of that stuff. I also think it's fair to kind of say, like, it's going to be a really, really hard bar for the next guy to clear, even if that is the bar, because we can't say that Brian Hartline is the best at something that he does in the sport and then have the expectation that whoever they hire next will be better, because that would mean the next guy is the best guy in the sport. Ryan Day can say that. We can be a little bit more realistic. You could still be really good, bring in the class that Ohio State just brought in, and all of a sudden, hey, you didn't have a first-round receiver this year, but you had one go 42nd. What's that?
Shame on you. The standard is the standard. Shame. I'm being facetious, obviously. You are 100% correct in that measurement. Though even Brian Day will say, no, that's the standard. I think it's the reason why the only genuinely reason I would push back is Ohio State's passing game is its superpower, even if it doesn't always like to use it, because it wants to play 14 personnel at the 37-yard line. No, we're not doing that.
Navy and Paul Johnson.
Yeah, it's so when that's your superpower, I do think it is important to make sure that whoever you put in that role next, if they're not 100% of what Brian Hartline is, I think they need to be at least 85% of what Brian Hartline is, simply because, again, when it's fundamentally the reason why you can compete for national championships, and that's your quarterback play and your wide receiver play, for this to be like the Kerry Combs situation where the cornerbacks were so good when Kerry Combs was here, Kerry Combs left to go to the NFL, and all of a sudden your secondary just like fell off a cliff. Like, that can't happen. Because they would have to fundamentally change what their offensive identity is if that were to happen in the situation. I think it would be hilarious if a recruitment next December comes down to a description of what you just said, a kid that Brian Hartline found when he was in the 300s, and now he's like the number 65 player, and now it's coming down to Brian Hartline versus Ohio State. I think that would be such a funny scenario.
So just real quick, I think there's a bigger topic of this that we could touch on. What do you think Ohio State's here? Map me out. You ever seen those outlines of people? It's like a sketch outline where it's like just a big question mark on that person's body. That's Ohio State's receivers coach. Build me the receivers coach. Because I think the reason I ask that is this. I think there's a reasonable expectations to say we want to keep up pipelines outside of state. Maybe it's worth bringing in somebody with Florida ties. Maybe it's worth bringing in somebody with this tie, that tie. Somebody who, like you said after the game, brings an outside perspective. It also makes sense to just say we've got Devin Jordan on staff. He's been in the program for a long time, and then you can sell that to recruits as this is mini Brian Hartline. This is the guy he's next Brian Hartline, right? We'll love him for 7 years, and then he's going to go on to better things because everybody's going to be pawing at him. I draw me out Ohio State, and maybe it's Devin Jordan, but draw me out Ohio State's ideal receivers coach to keep this recruiting run up.
It's why I think this was like a not completely ideal time for this to happen. If someone would have asked me in January, Brian Hartline is going to leave, I want you to mark down what happens. I would have said after the 26th season because it just feels like a clean break with, and I know Chris Henry would be here and going into a sophomore year, but we are not 1,000% sure that Chris Henry Jr. is going to be a starting receiver in year one.
Yeah.
So
we need to see him play football.
Yeah, and it's not anything against him. This is still a really good football room. It's just it didn't look great this year, but I think if you're the floor of how good these receivers are going to be is still significantly higher than some of the other rooms are. And so the reason I would have picked 20 after the 26th season is JJ's leaving, clean break, and you're kind of starting from scratch anyway. I think this is an interesting time for him to leave because JJ's got one more year here, which is why when you bring up Devin Jordan, I don't think that's off the table. I think Ryan Day is going to be observing a lot of different things. I don't think Ryan Day is going to be hiring anybody on his staff in the year 2025. I think the calendar year will have changed by the time he makes some of these decisions, simply because, I mean, if we're going to use how he hired a defensive coordinator last year as an example, that went longer than maybe we all anticipated it because he's going to go through his process and not rush anything. So from a recruiting standpoint, I think the 2026 class is the bar of if you're going to get 4 guys, these are the hats they need to fit in because larger rosters, you got to be willing to take more developmental guys. And that's what Jaden Ricketts is going to be, right? I think you got to have a guy where, as Ryan Day said, evaluation is so much more important than it's ever been. You got to find a guy where you evaluated the you-know-what out of him. And we might look back later on and go, oh, that guy was super underrated. Kudos to the assistant coach for finding that diamond in the rough. I think Brock Boyd might fit in that scenario. And we'll get into some of that on the second half of this podcast. And then you got to have 2 guys where by year 2, they should be ready to play football for you if you need them to play football for you. If Chris Henry's not ready to go by 2027, something has gone significantly wrong with his development. And I think Jaquaden Guilford, I don't think he has to be that extreme because he's not the number 1 receiver in his recruiting class. But I think it's a fair expectation to go, hey, Jaquaden, if you spend your first year developing, in 2027, you should be able to compete. So if you can't do that, then you can't play. I think the scheming part of it can take a bit of a backseat because I think Day might solve those issues with how he goes about his offensive coordinator. I actually don't think the offensive coordinator is also going to be the wide receivers coach next year. So you can solve the scheme thing with offensive coordinator, Keenan Bailey. Ryan Day is still an offensive guy. So if I had to choose perfect hire, a dude who can recruit the heck out of the position and develop it. And we'll worry about the scheme later. What the heck is going on with Legend Bey?
Yeah. So I think a timeline here is probably just the easiest way to run through this thing so people's heads can also explode. June 28th, 2025, Legend Bey commits to Tennessee. Legend Bey commits to Tennessee, and he is a interesting prospect. He is about 5'11". He plays quarterback, notable, at North Forney High School in Forney, Texas. He ends the class as the number 175 overall prospect and the number 9 athlete in the 247 composite rankings. He's a track athlete. You look at his stats through the regular season, he threw for 1,300 yards. He also rushed for 1,600 yards. He had more rushing touchdowns than he did passing touchdowns. Very clearly that North Forney, and as they should have, very obviously used his running ability. Ohio State and Tennessee saw it differently, and they thought maybe he should not play quarterback in college. So he's getting recruited by Tennessee as kind of this slot receiver. They run that kind of weird offense where like the receivers basically line up like a yard from the sideline. It's a unique kind of look, and we all know Tennessee's offense. You all listen to the Buckeye Talk podcast from last year when they played. Ohio State starts getting in the mix. November 1st, he takes an OV to Ohio State. That's for the Penn State game. Gets an offer from Texas. Less than 2 weeks later, he decommits from Tennessee, and he flips his decision to Ohio State. So Ohio State lands him, and what they're doing is they are looking at him as a Curtis Samuel type player. If you remember him at Ohio State from about a decade ago, kind of a hybrid type of player. I asked Ryan the day after he committed, or a couple days after he committed, about the value of versatility, and he gave an answer like, if you can only do one thing, you better do it really, really well. For example, JJ can do something really, really well, which is catch the ball. I don't think anybody's going to look at JJ and be like, well, he can't block. Who cares?
Is that a shot at me?
Not really.
Okay. Because I keep
But,
talking about Big blocking.
you're gonna look at, you got to look at a corner and say, well, he can only play man, he can't play zone, blah blah blah. Like you need to have versatility. You need to be able to play inside outside. You need, if you're a defensive tackle, to not just be a one tech. You need to be able to move around. That's kind of been the way that they've liked this, but they also now can take players in this mix where it's, I don't know, he's kind of a gadget. And is that a negative? I don't want it to be. I don't want it to sound like a negative, but that's kind of what he was going to be. Then things get weird. And again, a kid flipping his commitment is not weird at all. That happens all the time. Ohio State did it a million times. We're going to talk about Ohio State decommitments here soon. Happens. So on signing day, there was a tweet beforehand from a local reporter. They did, as many of these bigger schools do, they do these national signing ceremonies where that was where the report got leaked that that Chris Henry Jr. had signed and everything was good, and merely I don't want to say a public address announcer, but somebody at the school said, Chris Henry Jr., Ohio State University. And then everybody went, oh, he signed, when in reality, he hadn't submitted the paperwork yet. So Legend Bey goes to one of these things and he gets quoted by a local reporter that asks him about Ryan Day. And he says, that's my guy. So everything looks fine for Legend Bey. And then he doesn't sign. And then it's starting to go through and it's starting to kind of trickle out what in the world's going on. And then there's a report from On3 late in the morning, right before Ryan Day was about to take the podium, that Legend Bey has delayed his decision from December 3rd to December 5th. December 5th obviously was the last day of the early signing period. If you want to early enroll, aka if you want to be on the sidelines with the Buckeyes for the playoff run and be there for the start of spring semester and be there for workouts and be there for everything like that, you have to do that. So he had to make a decision within 48 hours. Things got hairy. Then he flips his decision back to Tennessee, 1:42 p.m. Tennessee gets his paperwork. He's officially a member of the Vols. Apparently, I was reading a story in preparation for this. The Knoxville News Sentinel had a story that the University of Tennessee delayed Josh Heupel's press conference. It was supposed to be at 1:30. They delayed it so that they could talk about Legend Bey specifically. It was a signing day win. So again, he's going back and forth, committed to Tennessee, committed to Ohio State, back to Tennessee. Kind of again, it does happen, but it is pretty rare. Wore Ohio State stuff, showed up, and there was a lot of Ohio State stuff at the gym. And then at the last moment, he flips to Tennessee, and he goes to Tennessee. Then there started to be reports coming out about Legend Bey and his family, and specifically his mother and his brother, and what kind of role they had in this decision, and that there was reports that 247 reported it. I don't know if it was a national site or Tennessee site or Ohio State site. I apologize, but 247 Sports reported that his mother wanted him to go to Tennessee, and he wanted to go to Ohio State. Again, they're both kind of recruiting him to be the same type of thing. The issue comes now because Legend Bey is 17 years old. Apparently, he turns 18 years old in a couple of days or weeks, and you need a parent signature on a scholarship agreement with the university because he's not an adult. He's a legal minor. So he's 17 years old. So he needs a parent signature. And apparently, again, these are all reports that his mother had an issue. It got even weirder when on his Twitter account, he tweeted, "Good afternoon. I was recently logged out of my IG, which is Instagram, and probably will be logged out of this account as well by my older brother who has access to my account because I won't sign to the school him and my mother want." Everybody looked at that tweet and went, what in the blankety blank blank is going on? Legend Bey, that tweet was since deleted off of the account. He had obviously no one in this circle has done interviews despite multiple people trying. You can imagine everybody in the world is trying to figure out what's going on. That account has not posted since December 1st. All those tweets have been deleted. Or December 2nd, technically, it's his pinned tweet. He said, pull up to the signing day ceremony, which was at 10 a.m. local at North Forney High School. So where does that leave us? The transfer portal opens on January 2nd. Tennessee could release him from his scholarship and allow him to sign with another school. He could just enter the transfer portal and sign with another school. And I think there's a lot of fire out there that he would probably sign with Ohio State. I know this is a very long story, but there's a lot of twists and turns to this. like, again, I want to be clear here. He's not talked about this. His coaches have not talked about this. His mother or brother or parent or anybody in his family has not talked about this. This is all reported information, but something's going on with Legend Bey, and nobody has really gotten, I think, the whole story here. So, a really good football player is currently a Tennessee Volunteer. It remains to be seen if he's going to be a Tennessee Volunteer as of 3 weeks from when we're recording this podcast and when you're listening to this podcast. He could be an Ohio State Buckeye in a couple of weeks. He could not be. Nobody really knows, and that's where we're at. Go ahead, Steven.
Money ruins everything. Legend Bey is the number 175 player, number 9 athlete in the country. That entire story just told me this kid's going to be on the portal January 2nd, and he'll be a Buckeye. Money ruins everything. That's just, I've seen some wild stuff since I started covering college football. This is the wildest thing I've ever seen in my life, where it's from a lot of different angles. It's like, hyper, why do you want this kid if he doesn't want you?
Mm-hmm.
You know, why take a kid? I'm assuming there's probably some financial stipulations for the reason for why this kid is essentially a part of a recruiting class that it does not sound like, based on things he's posted and deleted and things other people have reported. He does not want to be there, but there's like financial things in place where he has no choice but to be there because other people agreed to things on his behalf. That's all I'll say. Money ruins everything. If
Yeah,
Legend
so we'll
Bey,
see.
Yeah, sounds like he's
Do
going to be
you
a Buckeye.
remember a couple of years ago, there was a kid, he committed like at like the Under Armour All-America Bowl or whatever, and I think he committed to like Florida, and his mom like stormed off like on ESPN. If this is all true, that's kind of what this is.
Except in this situation, the parent didn't storm off. They stayed sitting there and said, no, wrong decision, try again. And that's just, listen, this is if all this is true. I don't want to bow down for anybody's parents.
Exactly. I want to be 100% clear. His coaches, his parents, family members, nobody has addressed this from his side of things. This is all reported information.
Right. Based on everything that's been put out there, I guess we can list off one person that Ohio State will be adding in the transfer portal this offseason. Okay, let's take a break and get into some superlatives about the number 6 class in the country here on Buckeye Talk.
Oh, Hilton stay, your beds are soft and cozy. No lumpy couch, no stiff futon, no shower line at crack of dawn. Oh, Hilton stay.
When you want holiday comfort you can count on, it matters where you stay. Enjoy comfortable rooms and friendly service when you stay with Hilton instead. Save up to 25% this season when you book with Hilton. Hilton for the stay. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by McAfee.
Yes! Playoff tickets! Just need to click here and... Wait, what? Fake site? Good thing McAfee threw the red flag. That would have been $400 gone.
McAfee blocks risky sites so you don't pay for seats and other things that don't exist. Plans start at just $39.99 for your first year. That's cheaper than parking on game day. Learn more at McAfee.com/online protection.
In Walmart Sue Newville, time was ticking away. Only a few nights left till the big holiday. But last-minute gifters had no need to worry. Walmart Express Delivery got their gifts in a hurry. From Nintendo to Nespresso and Lego flowers, they could check off their lists in as fast as an hour. All of Who Newville, East, West, South, and North could order gifts up until 5 p.m. on December 24th. So this holiday, just do as the Who's do. With gift delivery this fast, they all gasped. From Walmart, who knew? Subject to availability, terms and fees apply.
This episode is presented by State Farm. Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like needing the protection of an offensive guard on the football field, but getting an elementary school crossing guard. Sure, they're both guards, but you can only trust one to keep your quarterback safe when the game is on the line. So don't settle for just any insurance when there's State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
And we're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means and Andrew Gillis talking about Ohio State's 2026 recruiting class. 27 players in the recruiting class as the number 6 class in the country. I sent Gillis a list of superlatives, just some people. Just a way of talking about some guys in this class. And the first one is recruiter MVP, the assistant coach who had the most impressive cycle.
Yeah, there's a couple of different answers that I think make sense here. I think you could say Brian Hartline, because Brian Hartline was committed to South Florida, and he was also helping commit to Ohio State. He was on the phone with Chris Henry Jr. telling him, go to Ohio State. I know for a fact that he was on the phone with some other people saying, like, follow what you did. Like, you could pick him. You could pick Tyler Bowen, who came in and did a great job and needed to do a great job and did. And he signed 5 offensive linemen in this class. The answer is safeties coach Matt Guerreri, because Matt Guerreri had the best recruiting job of anybody in this cycle with Blaine Bradford, the 4-star number 71 overall prospect out of Baton Rouge Catholic in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The fact that you go down into the South and land him is impressive. The fact that you hang on to him is more impressive. Stephen, I remember when Blaine Bradford committed, I don't think anybody really expected it to happen that quick. Like, I don't think anybody thought that he was going to commit when he did. We were getting ready for a spring practice, and I went expletive, and I had to grab my laptop before I went to the Woody, and I'm panicking as I'm trying to get a story up and make sure I make it to the Woody on time. It was a remarkable decision that everybody kind of afterwards went, but he's not really going to Ohio State, is he? He's not really sticking to Ohio State, is he? He's not really going to end up in Big Ten, is he? And, like, I'm sorry, there really wasn't even any drama with Blaine Bradford committing to Ohio State. Now, I know Ohio State, Mark Pantoni said we'll never be the highest bidder for somebody, but Ohio State will be a bidder. Like, Ohio State will, they will be aggressive and they will pay people. Ohio State's NIL is in a fine place. So the fact that he goes and gets him was impressive. Ryan Day called the signing unbelievable about landing Bradford. He said, I can't tell you how excited I am. And I'm sensitive just to start talking about one or two guys. But when you ask me specifically about somebody, then I'll certainly comment on them because I don't want to short anybody on a day like today. He talked about him being amazing from the jump. Quote, reminds me of some guys that we have back there right now. I don't know. Ohio State's safety room is pretty good right now. And I think Ohio State thinks of the number 71 overall prospect in a very high manner. So you land Blaine Bradford. It was the best recruiting job of anybody in this class. I know Chris Henry Jr.'s recruitment extended. I know all this stuff extended. But the fact that you landed Blaine, really, really, really impressive. Then you pair that with the fact that you get Simeon Caldwell. I believe he's related to Tim Walton. So you land him out of the Bowl School in Jacksonville. He's listed at 6'1.5". He's like 6'3". I think a lot of people look at him as like a future Sonny Styles. I don't know if that's true. They're going to start him at safety for sure, and that they actually genuinely believe that he's a safety. They timed him at like a 4.4, I believe, in their internal numbers when he came to the Woody. So Simeon Caldwell is a really, really talented prospect. He is certainly more of your in the box kind of let's put him close to the line of scrimmage type safety. He went out and evaluated Kamari Bing. He's listed as a corner on 247. Ohio State's going to play him at safety. St. Francis Academy. This is a kid that they evaluated late. St. Francis Academy, really, really tough school for Ohio State to get into. Blake Woodby, if you remember that name, he was committed in Ohio State's class. He flipped to Auburn. Ohio State, the relationship with St. Francis Academy has not really been like a strong one in the last couple of years. There really hasn't been like a real pipeline there, and Ohio State was able to go in and land Kamari Bing, and that was really impressive. And they flipped him from Maryland. He was committed to Maryland. I think he decommitted first and then committed a few days later. They land him. Very, very impressive. Fend off Alabama for that. And then on signing day, Caden Gebhardt, Olentangy kid, number 547 overall prospect. Just a really, really bang-up job by Matt Guerreri. You land 4 safeties in this class. One of them, who I just said was the best kind of recruiting job. I also think he's a hell of a football player. Blaine Bradford is somebody that can factor into the 2 deep in his freshman year. And I think when you get to 2027, I think you are probably looking at a starting tandem that may include Blaine Bradford and Fahim Delane. That's a really, really good job by Matt Guerreri, because remember a couple of years ago when Perry Eliano was here, we were kind of talking about what in the world's going on in safety recruiting, and now here we are. So Ohio State, really, really good job with Matt Guerreri. He's done a bang-up job trying to put this thing together. And when you compare him to the rest of the people on the staff, I mean, really, really good.
Most underrated recruit who is most likely to outplay his current ranking as of signing day.
Yeah, this one was really, really hard because I think the thing that I was struggling with was relativity. Like, hey, if there's a kid who's, 600 and whatever, like, for example, they said Mark Pantoni told us Brock Boyd is the most underrated receiver in the 2026 class. He's the number 602 prospect. So, like, number 602 prospect becomes like a 6th round NFL draft pick, 5th round NFL draft pick, that's technically like outplaying your ranking. That's technically like outplaying kind of where you are. So that one was always really hard for me. There's a bunch of different kids that I was kind of just like scrolling through, being like, maybe him, maybe this, maybe that. So I went with perhaps a unique one. I went with Jerquaden Guilford because he's the number 137 overall prospect. So people might be saying, Andrew, he's a top 150 prospect. What the hell are you talking about? I think this kid might be a first round pick. Like I think he's 6'2 and a half, 190, 137 pounds. Like you watch him play and you go, man, freshman, sophomore, not a lot there. Junior film's pretty good. And then you watch his senior film and you go, holy smokes, this kid's really, really good. And he was at a program that had really been struggling for a few years, and I'm sure that had a part to do with it. But Ohio State, I think this is one of those talent evaluation jobs where you look at him a few years ago and you see a 3-star receiver and you go, why would they take this kid? They already have 4. This was when Caden Dixon-Wyatt was in the class. I think Jerquaden Guilford might be first-round pick. I think it is a receiver, and I know they said Brock Boyd is, underrated and everything like that. Jerquaden Guilford is a darn good football player, and it would really not shock me if we are talking about him, frankly, kind of in the same conversation as like a Chris Henry Jr. Like if we get to, would that be 26, 27, 28, if we're going into the 2029 NFL draft, 2030 NFL draft maybe, and Chris Henry Jr. is kind of being bandied about as a first-round pick, I don't think that would surprise anybody. It would not surprise me if Jerquaden Guilford, frankly, was the top receiver that gets drafted in the NFL out of this receiving class. And that includes Chris Henry Jr., and that's high praise.
I take Andrew says a receiver is going to be a first-round draft pick at Ohio State.
Yep.
What a guard on the ledge. My captain, recruit who is most likely to be a captain one day at Ohio State.
Yeah, there were a bunch of different, kids I looked at. I went with Jordan Thomas, the corner out of Bergen Catholic. I almost picked Sincere Johnson, the Glenville linebacker, who I have seen a couple of times. I'm really impressed with him. But Jordan Thomas, like Bergen Catholic kid, 123 overall prospect, 15 corner in the class. Ohio State loves him. And like this is a corner that has a long wingspan. He's physical. He's aggressive. Everything you hear about this kid is not just what a great football player he is. Wow, like look at him. Like there are certain kids you hear about, and I don't want this to sound negative, but there are certain kids you hear about that are just really good football player. We're really excited to have him. We're really excited to see what this turns into. We're really excited to see what that turns into. It's not all the time that you hear this kid's such a great leader and he's got the best character, and all of this other kind of stuff. I interviewed his coach, Vito Campanelli, at Bergen Catholic, and man, the praise that this coach had for him was just really, really high. So I think this is somebody who, Jay Timmons is a really good prospect as well at corner, and I'm fascinated to see what Jordan Thomas and Jay Timmons compare. I think Timmons might end up in the slot. He's kind of got that Jermaine Matthews kind of athleticism where you play in the slot, play outside. Who knows? He's really good. But Jordan Thomas, I think, is just that quiet leader quality that might be really, really impressive on the back end. Again, there's a lot of kids that I think fit this role. There are kids you could say, like, maybe it matters that if you have someone from Ohio, all right, well, then you kind of look at Sam Greer, Maxwell Riley, right, is at the top of the class and say, like, maybe they're 2 offensive linemen that can really kind of lead this way here. Like I mentioned, Sincere Johnson, but yeah, Jordan Thomas is just, I think very highly of him. And I know people think very highly of him, not just as a football player, but as a teenager as well.
Biggest miss, the most impactful loss on the recruiting trail. This is not about people who were in the class and left the class. This is just they tried to win a recruiting battle and they lost the recruiting.
Yeah, this was hard. I ended up with Carter Meadows, the defensive end. He's from Gonzaga Prep in the DC area. He ended as the number 6 overall prospect and the number 2 edge rusher. He took an OV to Ohio State on June 13th. He committed to Michigan. Committed to Michigan in June, and then it was like a week after his OV to Michigan. I think that's why I went with him more than anything else. Look, Ohio State needed some talented edge rushers, and look, Zion Ely is really good, and he's going to Maryland, and they did a really good job because I remember at the time Carter Meadows was being talked about as like a top 100 kid who was just kind of okay, this kid's good, wow. he's a good football player. And we have now kind of gotten to the end of the line, and it's like, holy smokes, this kid's a top 10 kid and he's a defensive end. And, you watch him play. He's 6'6", 225. He's going to get to Michigan. He's going to put on some weight. He's going to be a problem for Ohio State fans moving forward. And that dynamic just changes so much of this. So Carter Meadows, I think, is the biggest miss. There were other guys like that. And that's part of why I think it's different, because I think, one, you needed edge rushers in this class. 27 is a big class for edge rushers, but like, I don't know. Jackson Cantwell was a miss, but like, sure, you can live with that. Savion Hyder, you would have liked to have him in the class, but oh well. You could, Felix Ojo, the offensive tackle from Texas, okay. Tyler Atkinson, he never took an OV here. He committed to Texas. There are really good football players that you could just kind of go down the line. Oh, they didn't get a better tight end. There's a Premer, I think is his name. He's going to Notre Dame. And, why didn't we get all right, I get it. Why didn't we get a better quarterback? Why don't we get this kid? Why didn't we get, I'm blanking on the kid's name, the defensive end who went to USC. I'll have to figure that out. But I totally get it. Luke Wafel, that's his name. Like, Luke Wafel was kind of in that mix for me as well. But Carter Meadows is going to Michigan, man. Like, you were in on him and he's going to Michigan and he's a top 10 5-star defensive end. That trumps everything for me. I know Luke Wafel's going to USC, and I know they think very, very highly of Luke Wafel, and they had him high on the board. But I know they also had Carter Meadows high on the board. Now he's going to Ann Arbor. So I think it was Carter Meadows.
Well, shocked you didn't go to Elbert Hill. That's a top 50 recruit from Ohio. But obviously, how much of that is like they get Jay Timmons in the class? You got Jordan Thomas in the class. Like they kind of offset it.
Yeah. So I think that's an interesting point. So I sent this out to our subtexter 614-350-3315 on Tuesday morning. There's a kid, Ace Alston, out of Anderson High School in Cincinnati. He committed to Notre Dame, and he's the number 2 player in Ohio per the 247 Sports composite rankings, behind Jameer Brown, and he's going to Notre Dame. So that means last cycle, Elbert Hill, the number 1 corner, is going to USC. The number 4 corner, Victor Singleton, is going to Texas A&M. The number 1 corner in Ohio in 2020, Victor Singleton was the number 4 player. Number 2 player in Ohio is now going to Notre Dame. The USC and the Notre Dame thing makes more sense than the Texas A&M thing and the USC thing. I think there were some various circumstances there. I know NIL was a factor in both their recruitments, which, fine, sure, that's the way it is now. But Elbert Hill was interesting. I just think the need at defensive end was probably a little bit stronger. They did go get Kari Wilder, who is very, very good. He ended as a top 50 prospect, number 42 overall. They see him as a day 1 contributor. I think that's important to note. They did go out and they got another edge rusher, Dre Quinn, but defensive end was a little bit light. And I think Luke Wafel could have been a consideration for me. It was positional value. It was where they went to school. I don't have any concerns right now with with Jordan Thomas or Jay Timmons at corner. And I don't really have any concerns about the future of that room. At defensive end, you have a little bit more. Then you pair that with the fact of what Mark Pantoni and Ryan Day were talking about. These kids are now investments. You are investing in these kids. You are putting dollar figures next to these kids' names. And you miss on a corner, you can maybe replace that a little bit easier than a stud pass rusher. If Carter Meadows goes to Michigan and plays 1 year as a freshman and has 4 sacks and looks like a future All-American first-round pick, and then Sharon Moore gets fired because they go 7-5 and he enters the transfer portal, you're not going to get him for nothing because you recruited him 2 years ago. He's going to be expensive. And I think that you have to pair that into this mix as well. It's just like the NFL, guys. You have to start thinking of it like that. So the philosophy that you have, whether it's your favorite team is the Browns or the Bengals or somebody else, you have to start thinking of it where there's a reason why the 2nd overall pick is not an off-ball linebacker. It's a quarterback, it's a left tackle, it's a receiver, it's a defensive end, it's a corner. There's a reason why all those things are true, and I think edge rusher is a bigger value prop than anything else.
Saying that in a world where the number 2 pick in the NFL draft might also be an off-ball linebacker in 4 months.
Maybe. But he also does some other stuff.
No, that's true. That's true. He's not just an off-ball linebacker. Yeah. This isn't 2007. They do a lot of other things other than just off-ball linebacker stuff. Okay, never mind. Which flip hurt Ohio State the most?
Yeah, I almost want to say Caden Dixon-Wyatt because we already talked about Legend Bey. I do think it's Legend Bey. We'll see if they get it back. Like
I
there are
mean,
certain
yeah, if we all think that Legend Bay is gonna end up a Buckeye anyway, it's like a flip by like business reasons more than it's it's like not a flip. It's just kind of go live in Knoxville for 3 weeks and then come up here.
So like I think it's Legend Bay just for the reasons that I said. Like Ohio State doesn't really have anybody like this on the roster, and I think as you get into this expanded world where rosters are expanding and also shrinking, where you go from 85 scholarships and 85 scholarships and 30 walk-ons to now just 105 and everybody's in the same bucket. You can afford to take a kind of player like that. And Ohio State doesn't really have that. Ohio State, doesn't really have like a, body type like that. He didn't really make any lists here, but like Braxton Rembert is somebody that I'm also really excited about. 6'5", 200 pounds. He's technically listed as like an edge rusher linebacker. Ohio State was recruiting him as a linebacker. James Laurinaitis was recruiting him as a linebacker. He's Arvell Reese in play type, in schematic type. He's not Arvell Reese in Arvell Reese. Like you can't again, you just said the number 2 overall pick. I'm not going to say Braxton Rembert is going to be the number 2 overall pick. We can't say that they'll just get the next Arvell Reese because
the thing is, we wouldn't have said that about Arvell Reese coming out of high school either.
Yeah, that is totally fair. But Rembert is like a different type of player that Ohio State didn't have. So that's why I think it's Legend Bay. But again, you might get him. I mean, like it's either him or Caden Dixon-Wyatt. I think Caden Dixon-Wyatt is another really, really good receiver. We have seen whether or not Ohio State has said it explicitly or they have showed us with our own eyes. There are concerns, at the very least, with Ohio State's depth at receiver right now. There was a reason why David Adolph was getting significant reps late in the season when Ohio State was having some injuries. There's a reason why we were having some questions about Mylan Graham and all this stuff. And there's a reason why we're talking about Chris Henry Jr. maybe being a starter next year. But Caden Dixon-Wyatt is really, really good. He's listed at 6'2", 180. I think he was definitely underrated by way of the rankings, just maybe because he had Chris Henry Jr. on his team and he had another 5-star. And, he was kind of playing the Emeka Egbuka role for his high school team where he's really good, but everybody's just kind of like, oh, well, there's this other guy. Do you know who 247 Sports comparison is for Caden Dixon-Wyatt? Carnell Tate. Like, he's the scouting report, which I agree with, is he's not 6'4" and he's not running a 4.25, but he's an elite route runner and he's really good with his hands and he's great along the sidelines. That sounds like Carnell Tate to me. I think so, Legend Bay is something that I think was a miss, obviously, and that hurts. But if they get him back, that kind of really doesn't qualify in that regard. Like, let's say if you don't get Legend Bay back, then I would say it's Legend Bay. But if you do, I think it's Caden Dixon-Wyatt because this kid's a really, really good football player.
Caden Dixon-Wyatt is number 135 player, number 21 wide receiver. The other flips out of Ohio State's recruiting class in this cycle: Jacob Weatherspoon, number 142 player, number 13. Cornerback, Legend Bay, as we already talked about. Aaron Thomas, number 574 player, number 50 offensive tackle. Cameron Brickle, the number 574 player, number 64 defensive lineman. And then Corbin Fordham, number 679 player, number 39. I think this is probably the softest losses in terms of flips Ohio State's lost on a signing day in recent years, where it's like, okay, they lost Caden Dixon-Wyatt as a number 135 player, but it's like, okay, did you get Chris Henry Jr.? Yes. And also I think Jaquan Guilford, him and Caden are around the same spot in the rankings, and I think he kind of gets that job done for you. Last one, most impressive flip for Ohio State of the cycle.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a boring answer, but I went with Jay Timmons. He's the corner out of Pine Richland in Gibsonia, Pennsylvania, number 64 overall prospect, number 7 corner in the class. State flipped him from Florida State, and I'll get into why I think that's impressive here in a little bit. But, I mean, this is a kid who elite athleticism. There are kids on this roster that you look at and say, oh, they're this, they're that. Like Sam Greer. Sam Greer's not playing center. Sam Greer's not playing guard. Sam Greer's going to play tackle. He's just freaking good at it. I think Jay Timmons can have success at inside or outside corner, right? Like there are kids that you map out and say, like, for example, I don't think that, like there are kids that, like Jaden Ricketts. I don't think Jaden Ricketts can ever play on the outside at Ohio State. I think Jaden Ricketts, if he develops, can be a good slot receiver. So Jay Timmons has the ability to be a good slot corner. He also has the ability to be a good outside corner. His athleticism is freaky. He's a track athlete, which I know, I've mentioned a lot. I think that's valuable. To those parents out there, let your kids play other sports. Don't just make them specialize. Make them do other things. So he runs track. He's a really good long jumper. He's playing for a really, really good area in Western Pennsylvania. Then why this gets impressive is Ohio State hasn't really done a ton in Pittsburgh. Like Mark Pantoni kind of mentioned that. They also flipped him from Florida State. He's the son of former NFLer Lawrence Timmons, who played for the Pittsburgh Steelers as a linebacker. He also went to Florida State. Florida State was a weird cycle this year for Ohio State because they had Corbin Fordham. His dad played at Florida State, and he ended up flipping to Florida State. Aaron Thomas, his dad played at Ohio or Florida State, and he flipped to Minnesota. But Florida State was in the mix, and they were kind of battling to keep him out of Florida State during his recruitment. And now Jay Timmons, they flip him from Florida State. So impressive that they were able to do that. Impressive that they were able to go into Pittsburgh, which is not an area that they've really had a ton of success. Impressive football player. Impressive addition to a corner class that needed another one. They weren't able to land C.J. Brana, the corner out of Florida, who was committed to Florida. They weren't able to flip him. But Jay Timmons, darn good football player. I think that was a flip that people might be very, very happy about in a year or so.
I didn't send you this one, but I wanted to wrap with this. Describe Ohio State's 2026 recruiting class in 5 words or less.
Good question. Sign of things to come. Hey, I did it.
Right. I was getting worried. I was really getting worried.
I was thinking in my head. I was like,
yeah,
crap.
I was thinking that I not give him enough words. Oh no, I think that's a good way to put it because there's a level of balance to this recruiting class where there's some stars in it. Obviously, Senior Junior is probably a future star. Kari Wilder's probably a future star here. Mark Pantoni talked about that kid like he needs to be ready to play football like immediately when he shows up here on campus. Sincere Johnson probably a future star. Sam Greer future star. Blaine Bradford. I don't understand what's happened over the last 6 months. That dude was the best safety in this recruiting class, and now he's down to 71 in a world where Ryan Day just like subtly told us that he looks like Caleb Downs. There's some stars in it. I think there's some depth pieces. I think there's some guys who are maybe a little bit more developmental. There are some guys in it that I'm not sure if 2 years ago they would be putting in this class, which is the reason why it's the largest class of the day era, 27 commitments in it, and it's what's necessary. Right, you only have one portal window, which means you got to get things right in your recruiting class. It doesn't mean Ohio State's not going to attack the portal when it opens on January 2nd. It's just you used to be able to go through the spring, evaluate guys, and then decide whether or not you needed to attack the portal again in the spring, which is what they tried to do with the defensive tackle group. That spring portal wasn't all that fruitful most of the time anyway, but now it just doesn't exist, which puts a lot more emphasis on if you want to be a program that builds its roster through the recruiting, through high school recruiting. As Mark Pantoni said, it's like you look at the NFL right now, the best teams in the NFL have built through the draft and supplemented with free agency. That's how Ohio State wants to do it. And because, there's only one free agency window now, you got to do more in the draft. You got to get more draft picks. Yeah. And that's what they tried to do in this class. And as they said, evaluation is more important than ever. So over the next 3 to 5 years of these kids' lives, we'll see if the evaluations on guys like Jameer Perez and Mason Wilhelm and Luke Fahey and Favor Key and even Blaine Bradford and on down the list there, working out in Ohio State's favor. We didn't talk about Fahey much at all on this podcast, but that's because he's been in the class for so long. And it feels like if there's 2 different descriptions for an Ohio State quarterback, there's that guy's going to play as soon as there's a chance to go win a job. And then there's a guy who was maybe a little bit more of a let's check back on him in a couple of years. He's probably fits that more than anything else, but he is also on the smaller side than what
he's a little bit smaller. The coaches rave about his accuracy. I wrote a story about him a couple of weeks ago where I talked to his coach and talked to different people, and it was like, hey, like this kid is one of the smartest, most accurate high school quarterbacks I've ever seen. His coach had coached at Bishop Gorman in Nevada and had coached like Josh Rosen and DJU, and he had kind of been around a lot of people, and he said Luke Fahey was the best one that he's ever coached. Which I thought was certainly notable. Again, 3-star kid, but you're not asking him to play in 26 because you have a Heisman finalist coming back. And in 27, you're going to have a 3rd-year former 5-star kid at quarterback in Tavian St. Clair, who, I mean, let's face it, with the realities of the transfer portal, will probably be Ohio State's backup quarterback in 2027. So presuming just a normal season happens, he will get some snaps. And then, I think Brick Handler will still be around. So like if you needed to get to your third string, you probably go to him. But then there's Fahey as well. Fahey's not there. Then 27, it's Tavian, and we'll see after that. And then I think this is a 28 conversation. It's going to be probably a battle between third year Luke Fahey and second year Brady Edmonds, and we'll see how that unfolds. Just one more thing to chime in on the things to come and sign of things to come. You're right. The portals, the one window thing matters. Trying to make kids work. Like you have to think of it as a money proposition, right? Like you're a fan of the Philadelphia Eagles. You're probably watching. We record this podcast on Tuesday. You're probably watching that Monday night game against the Chargers, thinking we need this, we need that, we need this, we need that. Well, you can't just go sign the most expensive linebacker, corner, safety, offensive tackle, offensive guard, wide receiver, running back in the free agency. You can't do that. Like I know there's a literal cap in the NFL, but there's also kind of a cap in college football, right? Like Ohio State's not spending $200 million on their roster every year. So you need to kind of make your money work. So it's the portal, it's mapping, hey, which kid do we think, and are they cool with being a development project and all this other stuff? I think the one thing I just really want to hammer home is like, I think you're going to see a lot of busyness in September, October, November from now on from Ohio State. I don't think, like we talked about this defensive end recruiting in the summer, and I think this cycle taught me, probably don't get worried until like November. Probably don't panic until November. If you're looking at it and Ohio State has, one receiver committed and it's Shamir Brown in 27, you're going, Andrew, what the hell's going on? Andrew this, Andrew that. Why don't we have this? Why don't we have that? I would tell you maybe be patient. And hey, why do they only have one safety? This is bad. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Okay, let's wait. We're not judging at the beginning of the start line. I think we could say where things are headed, but I think this class was pretty clear that Ohio State knows that they need to be right more than they are wrong, and that's what they're doing. It's like, if you ever, like, I've never had this happen. I'm 29 years old, but imagine somebody asks you, hey, let's invest in this stock. I really, really think that this is a good stock to invest in. You say, all right, I'm in. Let's do it. And they say, cool, give me $1,000. I'll put it in 6 months. What? It's this brand new stock starting out. You want me to put $1,000? You want me to give you $1,000 right now and then wait 6 months and then we'll see if it works? How about I just wait the 6 months and then I give you the $1,000 and see if I still want to do it? So you want to have every piece of information you have before any of this happens. And I think that is the way Ohio State's going to operate moving forward.
Number 6 class in the country, 27 commits. Though I think average star rating is probably a better way to measure these classes, because the reason why USC has the number 1 class in the country is because they have 35 commitments. They like loaded up on 13 3-star recruits in their recruiting class. Like nobody else in the top 10 isn't even close to that. The next closest is in Miami with 30 commitments. Ohio State has the 4th highest class from an average star rating standpoint of anybody who has at least 20 commitments, because LSU, they have an average star rating, but they also only have 14 commitments in their class. Oregon has the highest class from an average star rating standpoint, number 3, just like a total standpoint, 93.39. Alabama at 93.15, Notre Dame at 92.67, and then there's Ohio State at 91.83. Number 4 class by average star rating, number 6 class by just total points in this cycle. Though I don't know, man, the recruiting rankings matter. Urban Meyer once said it, if they're keeping score, we want to win. So Ohio State having the 3rd best class in the Big Ten, it's not nothing, but it's not the thing it was, I don't know, 5-6 years ago before we introduced all these new things to the sport. But that's it. 27 new people plus 1. I guess we'll see what happens with Legend Bey over the next month of his life until the transfer portal opens on January 2nd. That will close the book on the 2026 recruiting class. Outside of Bey, I don't think we're expecting Ohio State to be adding anybody in the, I think, February window of the recruiting class. This will be it. We'll move on to the 2027 class, where Ohio State has already kind of gotten underway there, man. They got 4 or 5 guys in that class, and we'll do this again. We'll go through the spring. We'll go through summer visits. We'll freak out after those summer visits. We'll get into the season. We'll get to signing day. We'll freak out leading up to signing day, and then we'll sign the class, and we'll all come back to this conclusion. Ohio State's in a good spot. 614-350-3315. 2-week free trial $399 after that if you want to come freak out with us about recruiting classes, because this is never not freak out time when you're talking about Ohio State's future and its recruiting efforts. So for Andrew Gillis, I'm Stephen Means. Talk to you guys later.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here for Mint Mobile. You know, one of the perks about having 4 kids that you know about is actually getting a direct line to the big man up north. And this year, he wants you to know the best gift that you can give someone is the gift of Mint Mobile's unlimited wireless for $15 a month. Now, you don't even need to wrap it. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.